Hello and welcome back to With It. Today's show we're going to have a little special, Halloween special. We are going to go over some ghost stories, exorcism, witches, and trace a couple of these myths of Halloween back to their origins. Going to be a great show. Stick around. Okay, we'll start out the show. We're going to talk about some myths that are out there. One of them is the candy, candy being messed with and it ends up hurting or killing a kid. Mostly myth, mostly. Most of the cases where they find pins or needles or something in candy, it's usually the kid that hands it to their parents saying they found it that did it. There were a couple cases though, and one is in 1964 on Long Island, and this is the first known case. The name is Helen File, and she was upset with older trick-or-treaters, teenagers going out and trick-or-treating. So what she did, she handed out dog biscuits, steel wool pads, and then poison ant buttons, which are a button that kills ants, kills mice, kills things like that. And then they arrested her and she said it was a joke and they didn't care. She ended up convicted of handing out poison to kids. So that's the first case of it actually happening to hurt a kid. The next one is, I believe it's 1974. But Timothy O'Brien is a young 8-year-old. He has a 5-year-old sister, and his father had gotten together with another couple, so they went over to this other house, the Bateses, and they went trick-or-treating with the Bateses. The Bateses have 2 young kids of their own. In the process of this trick-or-treating, the kids end up with 5 pixie sticks, which the Bates' kids each get one, another kid in the neighborhood gets one, and both of his kids get one. He gets home, and Ronald is the father's name. He goes ahead and asks the kids, what treat do you want before you go to bed? The girl wanted whatever she wanted. He wanted his pixie stick. So Ronald takes the pixie stick, and because it's all, it's full of sugar, it's kind of all stuck together, so he rolls it and then he dumps it in his kid's mouth, and this 8-year-old boy goes into the foaming of the mouth, cyanide poisoning, poison with cyanide. So calls the police get there right away, and they go ahead and confiscate these other pixie sticks, these other 4 pixie sticks, and they do an investigation. They're out looking for the house that gave away this candy. They eventually have Ronald, the father, go into that neighborhood, the Bates' neighborhood, and try to identify the house. And he pulls, as he's driving along with them, there's a gentleman out on his lawn, so he points him out and says, yeah, I think that's the house. Well, this guy had an airtight alibi, so that didn't end up doing it. They still didn't know who was ending up doing this as another Halloween passes. And finally, an insurance agent gets a hold of the investigators and lets them know that there was large policies taken out on the 2 kids, but not on Ronald or his wife. So Ronald took out high insurance policies on his kids and was going to have them both killed off and collect the money from that. So they ended up charging him for it. They gave him the death penalty, and he ended up being executed. I believe he was the first execution when they restarted him at the county jail, where they go ahead and do that. He was the first one done, and it took quite a while. He used up all his appeal processes that he had to him, and he was scheduled in 1976 on Halloween Day, so that would be couple of years on the anniversary from when he poisoned his own son. but then it got delayed, and finally around 1979, I believe it is, he was finally put to death. So that's the story of the actual 2 times kids were almost hurt by somebody putting something in, and one of them turns out to be the kid's own father, and he was going to poison the 2 kids of the friends that he went trick-or-treating with, and another kid in the neighborhood. He had 5 of them roaming around that were all poisoned. Now the stupid thing about this guy is he was asking all kinds of people about, not only about cyanide poisoning, but then he tried to buy cyanide at local places, and this all tied in, and that's how they were able to just nail this down airtight. So he's known as the Candy Man when he was in jail, and he's kind of proud of that name, and that's where the Candy Man comes from, and that's where the scare of people doing things to candy comes from. Now, like I said, you can't really find any injuries, serious injuries, or even, you know, a death from any candy until you go back until then. But it didn't stop the news. Like in 1970s, I believe it was Newsweek had ran a thing about how kids were dying of eating tainted candy, which was not true. In the 1980s, they started the free x-raying, and like I said, nobody's ever ran across that unless they put it in there themselves, and then, like the one guy says, it's probably the kids, because then they find it, they put the pin in there, they show the parents, they get all this attention, and maybe attention from news and maybe, you know, police and things like that. A good thing that it's not an actual thing that happens, as much as it sounded like it happened all the time back in the 70s and 80s. It really did not. So that's a Halloween myth that we killed off right there. We're going to get into another one real quick next. Okay, so in 2008, over in Chicago, they had these sightings of these clowns. It was actually a white van, so they said that it would be in a white van. It had painted up face, sometimes had balloons, sometimes had candy to lure the victims, and would hang around playgrounds. And people all over the place were seeing these clowns, or this clown. It could have been one clown. But many people were saying that this clown is going ahead and trying to lure these kids into his van so that, you know, they could disappear. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, but a lot of people in Chicago around 2008 said that they have seen that clown roaming around the playgrounds, driving around in his white van. So they had this big scare then, and it wasn't the only scare they had. 17 years prior, in 1991, they also had another scare with clowns, and they were seeing clowns everywhere, and they were saying that these clowns were trying to lure kids away. And in 2008, they nicknamed them the Killer Clowns. Pretty good movie to me. So, but clowns are pretty creepy, and they had these spates of sightings there in Chicago. And it turns out that there's a good reason for that, because 1972 to 1978, Pogo, which is John Wayne Gacy, that's his clown. And from 72 to 78, he ended up luring and murdering 33 young boys. He had one buried under his driveway, one buried under an extension to his garage, it sounds like, and then 27 of them were buried in the house, like under the ground. He used his clown outfit and probably balloons and candy to lure these boys, and, you know, 33 of them gone. That's an unbelievable number. That's still one of the craziest serial killer things that I've ever heard of. But that probably led to this clown sightings, and whether it's a folie à deux, you know, a delusion shared by two, or I guess you would call it mass hysteria when so many people are seeing the same thing at the same time. There's good reason for it. I mean, you never forget about something like that, especially with 33 kids. That's one of the bigger numbers of any serial killers that I know of. So that's the story of the clowns, why they were having such a hysteria over there in Chicago with the clowns. Now, one other story with the clowns is they have in their cemetery, it's a plot in the cemetery with 86 graves. 86 of these circus workers passed away. They were on a train, and it sounds like their train was hit by another train, that the conductor fell asleep and hit their train. And these trains back then, when this tragedy occurred, they were made of wood. So anybody that didn't die in the impact ended up dying from smoke and fire, and there were very few survivors. They talked to one clown. One clown was a sad clown the rest of his career, and that's because just before that crash, he had his wife and 2 kids finally join him on tour so that he could be with his family, and all 3 of them passed away, and he had said that he wished he had too. So a sad story there. And they do have the plot of land with the 86 circus performers, and Baldy the clown is named just because they knew of his name, Baldy, but many of the graves are marked with unknowns. So tragedy over in, I believe that's in Chicago that happened too. So a lot to do with clowns in Chicago, and we will move on. So another almost myth, I guess we could call it, is the whole babysitter and having issues when they're babysitting type thing. That almost never happens. In fact, the statistics show that your babysitters are no more in danger babysitting than they are wherever they're at normally. Because nobody's gonna know that you're there, you're gonna be there, so it'd be accidental for them to be there anyway. So you have those movies, you know, the kids upstairs sleeping, they have to check the kids, they're getting a phone call, it's from the house. Well, you go back to 1950, I believe it is, and Jeanette Christensen, she is 13 years old, and she is babysitting. And her friend is at her house, and at her own house, but she tells the story of her friend Jeanette as she's babysitting, that she had a weird feeling around midnight, her friend did, thinking, oh, I wonder what's going on with Jeanette. Tried to call Jeanette and the phone was busy. Well, prior to that, Jeanette ended up having the house broken into. She got on the phone, and she was actually on the phone with the police at the time, and they weren't able to get a trace on the line, so they just were able to hear her screams as she was, you know, being attacked. She had skin under her fingernails. She had abrasions on her, along her body. She was sexually assaulted, and then she was killed with a ironing cord. But what turns out odd is the ironing cord seems to be cut and just used a cord. It's not connected to the iron anymore. Police thought that was strange. Well, then there was another case right in that same town, and this town is Columbia, Missouri, and right in the same area, another girl 4 years earlier, not babysitting, but she was home alone, and she was found murdered in her house, and she was also sexually assaulted, and she was strangled with a cord that was cut off. So this is back before they even know what these they don't even call them serial killers at the time, but now they found 2 girls within 4 years, and then they found a bunch of rapes like in between those 2 murders, between the one girl 4 years earlier and then Jeanette when she was babysitting. So then they started looking into these people that ended up being charged with these murders, and it seems that some of them, there's no way that they would have committed the crime, but they were, you know, going away for, one of them was killed his wife, maybe in a domestic dispute, but he was going away anyway, so he was put to death for it. I do believe he was executed, and he wasn't the only one. So they started wondering, well, what's going on here? Is somebody covering for somebody? But they never able to solve that. Whoever went ahead and did the 2 murders, they said that it's most likely the same guy, especially with the cord being cut like that and used the cord only. And he got away with it. They were never able to find him. They had one pretty good suspect, but they said he passed a lie detector test, but this is 1950. They're not real reliable back then. So that's the story of babysitters. Okay, Annabelle, the doll, the real doll that's a ugly looking Raggedy Ann doll with the triangle nose, the old-timey doll. This doll was given to Donna Deidre we'll go with Donna, could be either one, but she's a nurse, and she's given this for her 28th birthday from her mother. So she gets this doll, and she lives in an apartment with her friend Angie, and her and Angie start seeing the doll not where they left it. It's moved around their apartment over and over, and they start finding these parchment notes. They don't have any parchment paper, but they see a note that says "help me" on parchment paper that they don't even have in their apartment. So after seeing all this, they end up getting a hold of a medium, and the medium comes out and checks on the doll. Tells the two girls that the doll is actually, there's a spirit in the house. It's a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle that passed away long ago, I believe on the same property that was on. And she wanted to go into the doll. She wanted nothing but to love the two girls. So the two girls tell this medium, yeah, she can go in a doll. And that's all in the movie. Well, now that she's in the doll, strange things get even stranger, and this next story, I think, leads to Ed and Lorraine Warren coming out and looking into this. Angie's boyfriend Lou, one of the stories is he's napping on a couch, and he hears rustling in the bedroom, and it sounds like it's Angie's bedroom, and he knows that Angie's not there. So he's wondering if somebody broke into the room because he's hearing all kinds of rustling in there. Nobody should be in this apartment. He opens the door and he sees Annabelle laying face down on the ground. The window's not open, it's not broken. The only thing there is Annabelle, and then he feels a pain and he looks down and he has scratches, bleeding scratches on his chest. That's his story. Another story is, and this one I believe is from Ed Warren himself, is that he was sleeping. He was sleeping and Annabelle came to his feet and climbed up his legs and started choking him. So this Raggedy Ann doll is choking this Lou kid. And that brings out the Warrens, and they do an investigation into this. And unlike the movie, it seems like Ed was into this first. And he says that they took the doll. They had to take the doll because they couldn't go ahead and kill the doll because it could set the spirit off and it could make it worse. So they needed to take the doll, and they have they call it the room of the occult at their house, where they keep all the things that are in all these investigations that they do. So they take Annabelle back there and they put her in her own casing. They have a exorcism for the doll, and they put it in this glass case that we've seen in the movies, and you can see it in the newspaper. I think I have a newspaper clipping of it in there. So this Annabelle doll, the Raggedy Ann doll, is now in this case. Now the thing was, when they were leaving, normally they would take the expressway, but Ed Warren was worried that the doll was so evil that something could happen, so they took a safer route home. And he said, sure enough, that when they were making turns, then, you know, they're taking a winding road, and as they're driving along this winding road, the brakes are being hit and it's trying to swerve the car. So this is happening at every turn they're at, like it's trying to throw them off of the road. So like he said, he was driving slow so that didn't happen. Gets home, puts Annabelle in the case. Now, there was a pair, boyfriend and girlfriend, that ended up in that room, and the kid was actually banging on her case and I think they show that in one of the movies where it kind of tips forward on the person. But these kids really did get into there. He tapped on the case, and I believe he got in a car accident shortly after that, and they kind of say that that's why that happened. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. The thing is, with these kind of stories that we're getting into now, we should start seeing stuff on video. I mean, there's no reason not to have a phone out and taking some of these pictures. And granted, this is 1970 and you can't do that. But I'm talking now. So either this stuff is actually happening back then and still going on, or it happened back then and it doesn't happen anymore because nobody's getting any of this on tape. So that's the Annabelle story, and now we're going to get into the next one that the Ed and Lorraine Warren looked into. That's their second most famous, I think. And it used to be their most famous until Annabelle came out, but it's so old now. Amityville Horror. The house that's on Amityville Street over in Massachusetts, I believe it is. Yeah, 1974. In 1974, the previous owner of the house, their oldest son, killed 6 members of his family, 4 brothers and sisters, and then his mom and dad, while they all slept. So the oldest son kills 6 people. The house sits probably trying to sell. And then finally, George and Kathleen Lutz buy the house. Yeah, December of 1975. So they buy the house at the end of the next year after the shooting had happened before. I don't know whether they knew about it or not. I would think that if that's the case, I used to be a realtor, so I would say that that thing was set on the market and it was a steal. So they might have known something was up with the house. But anyway, they're in the house December of 1975, and by the next year, they are fleeing the house. They're running away from the house. They left. They called Ed and Lorraine, told them about the house. They told everybody else they were under these supernatural spirits, were harassing them when they were in the house. And if you've seen the movie, yeah, there was bees on the window and some other things going on, and them trying to talk the dad into killing the kids is what the movie said. But I couldn't find Ed and Lorraine's investigative work on these things, and I'm probably going to look into them later for regular episodes to see if we can delve in and see exactly the timeline and what everything supposedly happened, especially with the Lutzes in Amityville Horror House, because I don't know how much of that is true or not. With Annabelle, I can tell, you know, just like movies do, it's not as bad as some movies, but they take something that's true that the girl said, yeah, you can go into the doll, and from there the whole movie is different than the whole real life. The worst movie to do that is The Strangers, because they say that's based on real life. Well, I think one of the people that wrote it or directed it or something had somebody knock on their, cabin door when they were off on vacation out in the middle of nowhere. They answered them, and they answered back, and then they disappeared. And that's what that movie's based on. So it's based on nothing, whereas this is based on a little bit more than nothing. So that's Amityville Horror, and like I said, I do want to still find out about this. But there's another case that they had, and this was in Brookfield, Connecticut in 1979. So David Glatzer is his name, and he's 11 years old. And he is, this one is kind of unbelievable because I have to read it. He would levitate, display animal characteristics, but levitating, I'd like to see that on camera, and then blow up to 3 times his size. Yeah, that's not happening. But anyway, exorcism, something to help him out. So they help out David Glatzer. Well, the house there, David had a sister named Debbie, and I think Debbie had her boyfriend Arnie, and Arnie lived there with him. And about 4 months after Arnie moved out of there, he ends up he murders Debbie, her boss, and then he blames that on being possessed by whatever was possessing David. So in this case, I'd say he's lying. And we'll get into another case that's crazy, with something else somebody uses as a defense, but it's a lot further back, but it's still going to be a crazy story. So those are the 3 biggest stories I've seen that Ed and Lorraine have worked on, and like I said, for me, I want to see some of this stuff. So, like I said, get your cameras out and show me some of this stuff. We'll be back with the next segment. Okay, now a little ghost story. April 22nd, 1966. I'm going to put clips of a lot of this stuff into the show so you can read what I've read to get to what I got. But Mr. and Mrs. Stanley Robinson in 1966, they have an apartment, and they turn the apartment over to ghost. They give the apartment to the ghost, and they still live there with the ghost. So they turn this apartment over, and then things start getting strange. So they have an exorcism. They have somebody come out and bless the apartment, and things go bad from there. And what was it? Mr. Robinson, he's laying there one night. They're both sleeping. She's sleeping next to him. He's sleeping there. And he wakes up to something like playing with his hair. Nobody in the room. He can't see anybody, but something's playing with his hair, ruffling through his hair. His wife wakes up at the same time, feeling pressure on her chest like somebody's laying over her to get to her husband. And I do believe they got up and got out of that house. At that time, at least I'd have been gone then. Ghosts, this kind of thing, I don't know. How would you prove it unless you had security cams all over your house, like Paranormal Activity? See, they're showing us how to catch this stuff. Somebody's got to catch it if it actually happens, So that's the story of the Stanley Robertsons. Like I said, it's just crazy that they would even have that happen. But that is so creepy that he's feeling something playing with his hair and she's feeling something laying across her. Neither one of them can see anything in the room with them. That is creepy. That's Halloween. Okay, August 10th of 1949, there's a Washington couple and they have a young son. Do I have his age? 14 years old. They say he is possessed. He's possessed by something, so they call a minister. And the minister comes out because there's some strange things going on. This minister says he witnessed the bed shaking when he was in there. So he took and placed the young boy in a chair. And the chair by itself slid back against the wall, and when it could go no further, it started slow motion tipping, like it was still trying to pull itself back towards the wall. And so the next thing they did was put a blanket in the middle of the floor, and they laid him on that blanket, and him and the blanket slowly slid underneath the bed. And again, this is what, 1940? Yeah, 1949, so you're not going to have any film or anything like that, but nowadays you would be able to have film about something like that, and that is just creepy and crazy. No levitation, no expanding your size, but that moving stuff like in Poltergeist, which is still one of the most creative movies that they had for like ghosts. But that's the story of the boy that was possessed. They had an exorcism for him or a blessing for him and cleared all that out for him. But kind of creepy, the chair going back against the wall and then him sliding underneath the bed like that. So that's the other one, and we have one more, and this one is a sad one because it's an exorcism, an actual exorcism that it seems was done by laymen, and it was done on a 2-year-old. Kira Canhoto, 2 years old. This is in 1995. The mother and the father and the neighbors all end up in jail. Or it's the mother, the grandmother, and the neighbors. The two neighbors end up in jail because the 2-year-old passes away from, it just sounded like it was brutal, whatever they were doing with him. And they'd probably say that it was demons that were doing it. You know, nobody buys that because they took him into custody for doing that. And how are you going to know a 2-year-old is possessed in the first place? That just sounds like those people are insane. So that's the stories of ghosts and exorcisms that we're going over right now. And we'll finish off with a little discussion about witches next. Okay, now we're going to go to Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Of all the things, I thought, you know, I guess over in England, over in Europe, these hangings, these witchcraft trials were going on for years and years. Here in the New World, because it wasn't the United States yet, it's just the New World, 1692 is the year that they had them. And what's the date? June 10th of 1692. Bridget Bishop, she was hanged. She's the first witch to be hanged in the New World in Salem, Massachusetts for being a witch. So she is hanged. She is the first one executed, and the official tally of the number of witches that were executed officially, I don't know if people were out there hunting them by themselves, but again, this was all in 1692 and there was 24. So 24 witches were hanged over in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Why they went off on just 1 year on witches, I don't know. Bad crop year. I mean, people were a little bit strange back then. The movie The Witch is really good because it shows you that, bad crop years, they are going to blame witches. And in that movie, it turns out to be a witch. That is just totally creepy. That movie with those two little kids sitting there doing their little chants, I was like, oh, this is just creepy. It's a very slow movie though, so I mean, it's not the greatest thing because for not much action, you wait a long time to get the payoff at the end. Hereditary is probably the same way. But that's the story of the 1692 Salem witches. And I didn't go through and look up any of the, they didn't have any newspaper reports from 1692. But this one is crazy. And this is probably the last witch trial ever where a witch was used in a court of law. And what happened here is just insane. Leadville, Colorado, this is in 1899, Boston Globe, 1899. Leadville, Colorado, and this is in the paper. I forgot about that. So you're going to be able to read this. But a Jewish family, they call it, moved into town. It sounds like the woman is a fortune teller. And there's this gentleman that wants some answers. He wants to see her and get what she knows about a business investment he's about to make. And she goes ahead and answers his questions, and it might have turned out to be good for him because he ends up back there. And he tells her that, I would like information on this other property that I'm thinking about getting, another investment he was going to do. And he bet her $100 that says that she couldn't tell him what any of the facts about the business and whatever he was investing in, and she nailed it. So she's got to be some kind of a fortune teller for him to go there and then go back. Now they do say that she's kind of a good-looking woman, and this gentleman's wife ends up, and what is his name? Roberts. Mrs. Rothenberg is the fortune teller, and Mr. Roberts is the one that went and saw him. Mrs. Roberts is not happy with Miss Rothenberg, so she gets a hold of Miss Rothenberg and tells her, look, I don't believe in you. I don't believe you're magic. I don't believe it's real. So she says that Mrs. Rothenberg told her, fine, I'm going to paralyze your kids, and I'm going to cripple your kids and paralyze your husband. Well, sure enough, the husband works in a mine. He comes down with an illness, and he can barely get himself out to work, and he's just running downhill more and more. People at work are staying away from him because he's going through these tubes and having headaches, and he's just not himself. So people are afraid of their safety working with him in the mine. That's how bad that gets. I don't know if he waited for the husband to leave, Mrs. Rothenberg's husband to leave, or he was just gone when he got to the house. But she was at home alone, and he broke into the house, and he beat her so bad that it says that she was pretty much hanging on by a thread. It beat her almost to death. Now he's on trial for murder, and he brings up that she bewitched him. And they actually allow this witchcraft defense. Now this stuff is in the court. And there's people coming in saying that one person saw her at night over by the grave of somebody that hung himself years before, like a founder of the town type thing. Some other crazy stories, some other people saying, oh yeah, she did this and she cursed my kid, and all these crazy stories come out. And this is 1899, like I said. It's just crazy because it was 1692 was the last time that witches were probably in court. That's 200 years before. 207 years if you want to be exact. So they go ahead. He gives this whole defense. The prosecution lets him roll with, oh, she's a witch, and just runs with it and says it's not okay that you beat her anyway. And he gets off with a $30 fine. That's it. $30 fine for beating this woman almost to death because he thinks he's bewitched by her. So like I said, 1692, they're hanging 24 women, none of which are a witch. I mean, yeah, you could go ahead and, study witchcraft. Sure, you could practice witchcraft, but I don't know that you're a witch. I mean, this is still people. So that's the story of probably the last time witchcraft was in a courtroom. So we have the first time that there was a hanging in 1692, 24 hangings that year, and then we have this, I guess, bookend where Roethlisberger gets beaten, and they use the fact that she's a fortune teller. I'm almost positive, and you'll be able to read the wording, that she's probably a fortune teller, and they used that against her. And they got away with beating Mr. Roberts got away with beating her simply because of people thinking that people from other places that can supposedly see things, you went to them to tell them what they see, and they told you what they see and they were right, and you freak out and call them a witch. What happened to getting lucky? So anyway, that's the show for today. A little Halloween episode where I'd go through and just pick out some things that I was running into in the paper that kind of surprised me. But thanks for watching. Make sure you go over to my other channel, Sharks Happen. I also have a pretty long top 15 great white shark attacks covered so far over there for the Halloween episode. So there's going to be one here and one there. That's the show for today with it. Like I said, if you have any kind of video of these levitating things or anything like that, hey, show us. I guess you can't put video in comments, so that's a problem. They should have that so we could slip a little video in there so we could help that out. But you can always get a hold of me at sharkshappen@gmail.com and send them there. I'm not thinking there's going to be any. So that's the show for the Halloween special. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back probably in the next couple weeks. I'll have another episode out. Got an interesting one coming out about medical conditions that are kind of oddities. So we'll be going over to that one next. And remember, if you run into something that makes you ask yourself, what in the hell is that? Put it in the comments. We'll take a look. Thanks for joining us.